It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Jerusalem. Go south if you want to live. The message from Israel to over 1 million people in Gaza. The United Nations calls for Israel's evacuation order to be withdrawn, describing Gaza as a hellhole on the brink of collapse. Israel's Prime Minister says that this is just the beginning as people in Gaza decide whether to stay or go. But fears for the safety of Israel's missing in any onslaught. We hear from the desperate relative of a 3-year-old girl now believed snatched by Hamas gunmen. Also, Sky News sees documents which appear to show the long-term planning of Hamas's massacre dating back a year. In the wider Arab world, there are protests in solidarity with Gaza and against Israel. A dark day for English football, the verdict from Israeli Football Association officials as Wembley's arches stay neutral. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview. That's from 10:30 right through to midnight. Good evening then from Jerusalem. Our enemies have only started paying the price. That's the message this evening from the Israeli Prime Minister as his military forces launched their first ground incursions into Gaza. Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel was striking at its enemies with what he called unprecedented might, but warned that this is just the beginning. Meanwhile, latest figures from the Palestinian Health Ministry said that 1,900 Palestinians are now thought to have died. Earlier, Israel Defense Forces gave the clearest indication yet that time was running out before a major offensive. Israel ordered Gaza residents living north of the Wadi Gaza River, a population of around 1.1 million, to move south of it. But Hamas has called on residents to stay and ignore the order. To move south, there is only one main highway and bridge in and out of the area in question, the Salah al-Din Road, which runs from one side of the strip to the other. There are a small number of other crossings, but their condition is unknown. Our international correspondent, John Sparks, has this report.
An uncompromising message flutters on the breeze. A sky full of paper delivering the order to flee. The city has become a battlefield, it says. You must evacuate to the south. Everybody understood Israel's directive, but it wasn't easy to respond. Do you shelter in the ruins or risk death on the road? A question and a dilemma shared by all. I've been looking for safety, calls a man from the rubble. A woman replies, I've been hiding, but I'm getting out now. I can't take it anymore. The Israelis gave residents 24 hours to get out, and tens of thousands did as they were told. Our team filming as they move south towards the Gaza River Valley. Some crammed into battered-looking vehicles, others fleeing on foot, everyone fearful of being caught in an airstrike.
We haven't done anything wrong. We haven't done anything wrong. If you look at this area, there are children who haven't slept for 4 days.
He said he wants to escape, but he doesn't know how.
Okay, secure the road towards Salahuddin, and we will go. But you can't take 10 or 15 members of your family on an unsafe route.
As the Israelis conduct raids and mass troops at the border, there are many in Gaza City who are going to stay put. The river valley is just too far away. What can I do? What can I do? I have to get these to my children, said this woman. The UN says it won't force people who've taken shelter in its schools to leave, although more than a dozen of its buildings have been damaged. Their occupants told us they weren't sure what to do.
We stayed in the school, waiting, and thinking God will save us. But now we have to go. We'll see what happens.
There are impossible predicaments that have to be met. Flee Gaza City or lay your loved ones to rest. Here, a man collects the bodies of 16 members of his family from the rubble. It breaks my back, he says. The whole of Gaza is under fire. The exodus has started, although Hamas told residents to ignore it. A day of difficult decisions for people facing a precarious future. John Sparks, Sky News.
Well, as the people of Gaza brace themselves for a renewed attack and invasion, Israeli forces massing on the border continue to ramp up the war effort. More than 6,000 bombs have been dropped in Gaza by Israel in the past 6 days, hitting more than 3,500 targets. But away from the military preparations, Israeli families who suffered an incursion from Hamas forces coming across the border still hope for the safe return of those who went missing. Our defence and security editor Deborah Haynes has visited the Be'eri kibbutz, close to Gaza, where more than 100 people were killed by Hamas.
Israeli forces mobilising for the next phase of this war. The major ground assault on Gaza seems more a matter of when, not if. Israel releasing footage of what it said were raids into the territory in a possible indicator. On the Israeli side of the border, we found soldiers preserving their strength.
Everyone, we will save everyone.
It's already been a hard fight. This whole area of rural villages in southern Israel was a war zone almost exactly a week ago when Hamas militants invaded. The body of an attacker still lying on the ground. We're in a kibbutz called Be'eri, which is very close to the Gaza Strip. It was one of the places worst hit in last Saturday's attack. More than 100 people here were killed. And then there are the kidnapped. Yarden was seized with her husband and 3-year-old daughter. At one point, they broke free. She handed the girl to her partner, who could run faster. The father and the child escaped. Yarden didn't. Now, her brother says his niece needs her mum back. Does she realise?
I think that during days she behaves well. During night, it's a nightmare. She wakes up, she screams, she asks for her mother. Where is her mother? So I think that she understands that we are all doing our best, but inside, she is devastated.
It happened at the grandparents' house. Normal life shattered. Yarden's brother-in-law showed us the room from where they were taken. The militants also captured his sister and mother.
I lost everything. I just want the one that life is back. That's the main thing, Yari. All the story is fine, but that's the main goal. To bring back my family and everyone else. No, nothing else.
Back outside, the danger is ever present.
Get down. Down.
Israel wants to end the threat from Hamas for good. But there are no guarantees that military strength alone will be enough.
And Deborah joins me live from Ashkelon in southern Israel. And Deborah, we started the day with this sense that the clock was ticking towards a major escalation. How does it feel to you tonight?
Well, one soldier that I was speaking to off camera was talking about the hourglass ticking away. Clearly, nobody knows, or nobody's saying publicly, when any large-scale incursion will happen, and it is still, therefore, a question of if. However, if the evidence is anything to go by on the ground, Israeli forces are clearly preparing for a big mobilization into that territory, and they all seem, those that we have spoken to, ready to do that. A soldier again said to me that the scenes of brutality that they witnessed at the hands of the Hamas fighters, who almost exactly a week ago to this hour came over the border and unleashed hell on these communities along there, that really is strengthening the nerve of the soldiers as they prepare for what would clearly be, if the order is given, an incredibly difficult urban warfare, urban fight against militants who know the territory well, who clearly have been training hard. And while, yes, of course, the Israeli forces are preparing, are readying themselves for battle, you can only imagine that the Hamas fighters are doing the same.
Yeah, OK, Deborah, thank you very much indeed. Well, all eyes now are on the Israeli government, how they will respond, what's the end game, and how they will seek to minimise civilian casualties. Tonight, a Gaza hospital was given orders to evacuate by tomorrow morning amid fears it could be bombed. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports.
The Israeli Air Force has carried out hundreds of strikes on Gaza today. It is unrelenting and it is devastating. And Israel has now carried out the first ground operations in Gaza. It was a small mission to target Hamas rocket crews, not a full-scale invasion. They are still awaiting those orders.
We are conducting our operations adjacent to the perimeter, raids in order to locate potential abductees, but also to identify bodies and seek out terrorists that potentially are still hiding in the perimeter of the border area.
Israel's order for civilians in northern Gaza to move to the south has created alarm in the Strip and across the world. Many do not want to leave their homes or physically cannot.
The United Nations considers it impossible for such a move to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences. The United Nations strongly appeals for any such order to be rescinded, avoiding what could transform what is already a tragedy into a calamitous situation.
Sky News understands that discussions are ongoing to open up a humanitarian corridor into Gaza, but there's been no agreement yet.
If you cut Gaza off from food and water, the only result is you start starving.
We're not going to get to that point.
Are we not?
We're not going to get to that point.
Why not? I mean, will there be humanitarian corridors, limited humanitarian corridors set up? Because at the moment, doesn't look like there's any sign of them.
We're not going to get to that point.
Hamas had called on Palestinians to go onto the streets in a day of rage. Friday prayers at Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem, a potential flashpoint, passed peacefully. Israeli police prevented many young men from entering the compound. There were some small clashes in East Jerusalem. Tear gas was fired, but no serious injuries. But in the West Bank, 11 Palestinians were shot dead. 2 were killed when Israeli settlers attacked a funeral. Many feared that today would be the day that the war came to Jerusalem, but for the most part, this was not the case. That is not to say it will not happen. A ground invasion of Gaza or a sustained and brutal bombing campaign could still light the flames elsewhere. There are uncertain and nervous days ahead. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Israel.
Well, you heard Alistair talking there about the possibility of a humanitarian corridor. The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, have both been in the region today meeting key players. But it was Mr. Blinken's meeting with the Qatari Prime Minister that hinted at the attempts by the Biden administration to elicit help from Arab countries to alleviate the growing humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
We need to ensure, for example, that there are safe areas in Gaza for civilians. We're working through the details on that, and more to be said in the days ahead, but that's a priority for us. We're discussing this with the Israeli government. We're discussing it with others.
We exchanged views on ways to open humanitarian corridors to ensure that relief and aid reached our Palestinian brothers as a result of a bombing, especially in light of the deteriorating conditions in the Gaza Strip.
Well, the Defence Secretary Grant Shapps told me today that it's likely that a number of Britons and dual nationals are being held as hostages in Gaza. And with an escalation in Israeli military operations seemingly imminent, there are increased fears for the safety of all those who were captured. Hamas has claimed today that 13 of the hostages they were holding in Gaza have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. It means more trauma for families torn apart by the barbarism inflicted in southern Israel last Saturday. But for one young man waiting for news, he told us, was unbearable. She is a happy 3-year-old who was on a holiday visit to her grandparents' home. Now young Yahel is believed to be a hostage in the hands of Hamas. So too her brother Neve, here sending a birthday message to a friend. Their older cousin is bereft.
Really lovely children. Neve is a very, very smart kid. He's 8 years old, and really he just loves everyone in the family. The moment I see him, he comes and runs and hugs me.
But there is more, much more. Also missing and presumed to be in the clutches of Hamas are Yotam's parents, aunt and uncle, and several other cousins. So Yotam is now working tirelessly to make the fate of his family known and to rally support, including making social media videos with other family members.
My father, my sister, her husband, and both children. 10 people, my family.
His biggest fear is that the military action that's coming will put his family in mortal danger.
People starting to raise ideas about wiping out Gaza and carpet bombing the neighborhoods, and while they're Israeli citizens being held there hostage. And I worry. I worry for my family, and I worry for whoever else might be held there.
We leave Yotam as he embarks on a tour of European embassies here.
Hello, I am Yotam.
A man on a mission who knows time is not on his side. Well, the First Minister of Scotland has given an emotional account of his family's suffering during the war between Israel and Hamas. Humza Yousaf said he felt powerless to help his family and stressed that civilians in Gaza should not pay the price for the actions of Hamas. He's been speaking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, ahead of the SNP's annual conference, where his plans for Scottish independence will be under the microscope.
Good to see you. The First Minister of Scotland and the leader of the SNP, a politician with huge power, profile and influence. But today, a husband and father at a loss over how to protect his family caught up in the Israel-Hamas war.
I cannot tell you, Beth, how powerless and helpless I feel.
After Humza Yousaf posted this video of his mother-in-law, Elizabeth, trapped in Gaza.
This will be my last video. Everybody from Gaza is moving towards where we are. Where's humanity? Where's people's hearts in the world to let this happen in this day and age? And may God help us. Goodbye.
Do you fear that you'll never see them again?
We look at our phones every night. My wife will look at her phone every hour, because at night is when we're most distressed, as you can imagine. And I do not know, I genuinely do not know if I will see my mother-in-law and father-in-law again. Nadia doesn't know if she's going to see her mum and dad again.
How do you explain this to your little daughter about her grandparents?
For my 4-year-old Amal, we tell her that Granny is scared of the thunder, and she keeps asking to speak to her gran, and at times we can get through, most of the time we can't. And then she keeps asking us, is Granny still scared of the thunder? And we're saying she's still scared of the thunder. And, you know, she asked last night, will Granny be back for Halloween? Because my daughter loves Halloween like every kid loves Halloween. And my mother-in-law helps with the face painting every Halloween. And we said, of course, she will be back. But in my heart, I don't know if she will.
Have you spoken to the Prime Minister about it? Have you asked him to help?
I'm disappointed, I have to say, that James Cleverly himself hasn't been in touch.
So the Foreign Secretary hasn't been in touch, the Prime Minister hasn't been in touch?
No, neither of them.
Away from Gaza, the SNP's prospects and polling in decline. Even so, the leader wants to talk up the prospect of a second independence referendum. Are you now considering moving from most seats to majority of seats for the mandate? If it was the most seats, you could get 24 and Labour could get 23 and then you could claim a mandate. I mean, that would be ludicrous, wouldn't it?
If you win the most seats, you tend to be the winner of the general
You've got 48
election.
seats at the moment. You can't possibly say we've got justification to call for a referendum.
The party that wins the most seats tends to be declared the winner of that general election, and then you can push forward with the mandate that you have in your manifesto.
But politics on the back burner in the face of personal pain. What really matters to this man is getting his family out of Gaza. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Glasgow.
Well, from the moment the scale and the horror of the attacks on Israel became clear last Saturday, one of the central questions has been, how did Hamas manage to mount such an operation without the knowledge of the Israeli security or intelligence services? Well, Sky News has obtained access to a planning document detailing exactly how they planned and executed their attack and how far back that planning went. Our data and forensic teams have been examining the details. Sky's Adele Robinson has more.
The documents were shared by the South First Responders, a volunteer group, and are said to have been found on the bodies of Hamas militants. It's 8 pages, with 4 initially made public. Now 4 more have been shared with Sky News. We've shown them to Hamas experts who've said that while the documents are difficult to confirm with 100% confidence, they are likely to be genuine. Now, this is the cover page of the documents, and throughout we've seen what appears to be a military plan to attack Mefalsim, a kibbutz near Gaza. It's just west of Sderot, which was targeted by militants, and a bit north of Kfar Aza, also attacked. Now, each page is labelled top secret. You can see in the middle there, that's the verified logo of the El Qassam battalion. And this is crucial. See the date, October 2022, showing that these may have already been well-established plans a year ago. Now, this page sets out the raid plan. It's titled Mission Kibbutz Mefalsim, a plan, however, that wasn't successful. Militants were reportedly pushed back by local security, and it's believed nobody inside the kibbutz was killed. Now, this document includes information about who they're facing in Mefalsim. So the number of Israeli civilians there, it says 1,000. And of those, 20 are described as regional defence forces. Now, this is described as one of the most important documents found. A step-by-step guide with duties assigned to teams going into Mefalsim. It details the roads to advance upon the kibbutz and instructions for both teams on how to enter. For example, Group 1 opens a gap in the wire fence and attacks from the south. Also, instructions for militants to take soldiers and civilians as hostages for use in negotiations. This is another page shared with us from the document. It details the equipment needed by the fighters and the approximate time it'll take for the fighters to open gaps in the dividing wire. So all of the main documents related to Mefalsim, a kibbutz between 2 others attacked, Sderot and Kfar Aza, north of Reim, where the music festival massacre took place last weekend. But also shared by the South First Responders was a picture of a map, supposedly from Hamas, found near to the kibbutzes that were attacked. It appears to show a northerly route that fighters were to follow. Now, we've verified 3 videos showing Hamas presence along this route, shown here. Let's have a look at the video from video 2 in the middle here. This was posted to Telegram by Hamas, showing fighters at a road intersection. This video was taken further up the route. Dashcam footage shows Hamas fighters appear. We've paused the video here. We believe the driver of the car died just seconds after this. It all shows the scale of planning behind the deadly attacks, and questions may now be raised over potential intelligence failures, considering the possible length of time in planning.
A Reuters journalist has been killed by Israeli shelling while covering clashes in southern Lebanon. A videographer, Issam Abdullah, died when a shell landed in a gathering of international journalists, 6 of whom were also injured. Reuters has confirmed the death and says it's urgently working with the authorities to seek more information. A terror investigation has been launched after a teacher was stabbed to death at a school in northern France in an incident the Interior Minister claimed was linked to what was happening in the Middle East. 2 people were also injured in the knife attack at the Gambetta Secondary School in Arras. A suspect believed to be a former student at the school has been arrested. Well, since this conflict began, a central concern of world leaders has been to prevent it from spreading across the region. Today saw protests in cities across the Arab world. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports now from Lebanon.
As Western governments express their support for Israel, protests against the bombing of Gaza are getting louder. In Lebanon, where there's a large number of Palestinian refugees, people came out across the country to express solidarity.
War will start pretty soon, and it's going to be a long war that will last for 30-40 days. But soon enough, the land will be ours again.
Palestine will be free again, and we are beside her, and we will stay for the end.
Hamas's massacre has triggered an unprecedented response from Israel. And here, the deputy leader of Hezbollah, Naim Qassam, warned the axis of resistance would not remain silent. When the time comes for any action, we will carry it out, he told the crowds.
This area of southern Beirut is a Hezbollah stronghold. Now, thousands of their supporters and others have come out to show their solidarity with Palestinians, but also their defiance against Israel. Now, these protests are being played out across the Arab and Islamic world.
In Iraq, there was also anger. Demonstrators took to Tahrir Square in Baghdad, burning the Israeli flag. And this was the scene in Tehran, a sea of Palestinian flags as they chanted "Down with America" and "Down with Israel." The morality of what is happening in Gaza is polarizing the world. In Bangladesh, another Muslim country, thousands marched for the Palestinian cause and to decry Israel's tough military response. Israel is warning this will be a long campaign, and across the Islamic world, anger will only grow as civilian casualties continue to mount. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Beirut.
Well, the tensions here in the region have found a distant echo on the streets of the UK, which have seen heightened security around potentially vulnerable locations and what the Met Police today called a massive increase in anti-Semitic incidents in London since the Hamas attacks on Israel. Sky's communities correspondent Becky Johnson reports.
Posters of missing Israeli children were torn down.
This is for Palestine.
They're not mutually exclusive, it's children. It's children, it's innocent people.
Okay, what about the children in Palestine?
It doesn't make it... right.
As tempers flared on a street in London. Hamas had called for an international day of rage, but at this mosque in Birmingham, there was a collection for Gaza and prayers for peace.
As a mosque, as a Muslim community, we absolutely condemn the loss of innocent lives. We are not condoning the loss of any innocent lives here, whether it's, my child or the child of a Palestinian or the child of an Israeli family. What's happening right now in Palestine needs to end.
There's sadness here and anger, but no desire to see Jewish people targeted.
As Muslims, we believe that if you were to take one life, it's as if you've taken the life of the whole of humanity. And any sort of day of rage or any sort of unjust, damage to property or anything like that, it's not justified.
In this Muslim community, we found empathy, although many were unwilling to be filmed.
It's not good what's happening in Gaza.
How do you feel about Israel and what Israel's doing?
Of course, Israel, they feel attacked as well by the Hamas, so they're doing what they think is right.
In London, the mayor was at a charity that's preparing to deliver medical aid to Gaza, as thousands are due to join pro-Palestinian demonstrations this weekend. He had this message for people planning to take part.
What you mustn't do when you're protesting is break the law by either inciting hatred, by intimidating other communities, or by glorifying acts of terrorism or showing support for a prescribed terrorist organisation.
While many British Muslims condemn the actions of Hamas, they want an end to the suffering of innocent Palestinians. No one we spoke to here wants to see division and hatred spill out onto Britain's streets. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Birmingham.
Well, England played Australia tonight in a football match that was billed as a friendly, but which was accompanied by considerable anger, including from the Israeli Football Association at the English FA's unwillingness to light up Wembley's arches in Israel's colours to mark the Hamas attack. Here's our sports correspondent, Rob Harris.
Tonight, we stand for humanity.
Wembley falling silent for the most contentious of commemorations. As war rages between Israel and Hamas, all innocent victims remembered before England-Australia. But no direct mention of last Saturday's Hamas massacre and the British citizens killed. And the Wembley Arch wasn't lit in Israel's blue and white to show solidarity as seen after terror attacks elsewhere. It angered the rabbi who quit his role leading the Faith in Football group.
Ultimately, I've resigned because the FA have failed. I don't think black arms bands are enough. I think that we've had precedents elsewhere where there have been massive terrorist attacks and we lit the stadium up in tricolours.
So why not, ask the government's anti-Semitism advisor, after the deadliest attacks against Jewish targets since the Holocaust.
British citizens murdered in Israel by Hamas terrorists, they've chosen not to recognise it. And I find that depressingly sad.
It was by one Premier League club, Chelsea standing with the Jewish community and highlighting the scourge of anti-Semitism. This is how Israelis unable to play football feel. This image posted by Tottenham player Manor Solomon. And the Israel Football Association said, those who are afraid to light up a stadium in memory of the murdered and for the sake of historical truth, for reasons that cannot be understood at all, and perhaps it is better to not even try, are in an even darker time than the one my country is currently in. Fans arriving at Wembley were split over how football should mourn attacks.
They should have had Israeli lights on there.
Why is that?
Well, we do it for the French, don't we? And why don't we do it for the Israelis?
Politics should start football myself. They should keep it red and white, keep it England themed.
Some Israeli flags were spotted in the stadium despite an FA ban, but it was a game free of protests or political displays, with the FA determined to recognise the suffering in both Israel and Gaza. Showing compassion is not without complications, with football facing a growing backlash on this emotive of issues. Rob Harris, Sky News, Wembley.
And that is News at 10 from Jerusalem tonight. I'll hand you back now to Emma in London.
Mark, thank you very much. Well, coming up next, we're going to be taking a first look at tomorrow's papers. In the press preview tonight, we're joined by the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng. We'll see you in just a few minutes' time. Among the stories we'll be discussing tonight is the story on the front of the Eye. Their headline tonight reads, "No escape. Gaza's try to flee but face Israel's revenge." That and plenty more after this break. We'll see you in a moment.
And now it's coming from both sides, and it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat is seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world. I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
The biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it. It got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits coming in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail. Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round.
This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage.
The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa!
Close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Hello there, welcome back. You're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive here at the Sky News Centre. It's time to see what's making headlines tonight, and we're joined this evening by the Guardian columnist Zoe Williams and the former Conservative Special Advisor Anita Boateng. They'll be with us now, right up until midnight tonight. We appreciate your time. Thank you both for joining us here on Sky News this evening. Let's have a look at what's on some of those front pages as they are coming into us. As you can imagine, the crisis in Israel and Gaza very much dominating. Concerns over the looming Israeli ground invasion leads the front of the Financial Times tomorrow. Their headline, residents flee Gaza City in fear. Similarly, here's the Eye for you. No escape. Gazans try to flee but face Israel's revenge. The Guardian says thousands have already fled ahead of the expected invasion, whereas the Telegraph reports that Israel has already sent in some forces and is warning of a powerful offensive to come. Likewise, the Mail tomorrow, Israel's tank strike into Gaza. The Express carries a plea from the Archbishop of Canterbury to give innocent people in Gaza the chance to survive. The Times tomorrow focuses on the plight of a disabled teenage girl who was one of the people taken hostage by Hamas attackers last week. The Mirror says police in the UK have been placed on high alert for possible terror attacks connected to the conflict in the Middle East. And the Sun tomorrow reports that the BBC has agreed £9 million in compensation for Freddie Flintoff after his crash injuries while working on the motoring show Top Gear. And a quick reminder that by scanning the QR code that you're going to see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch with us, so do check that out. As I say, we're joined tonight by Zoe Williams and Anita Boateng. Again, great to have you on the programme tonight. And let's have a look at some of these papers. A lot to get through, as ever. Starting with, Zoe, your paper, The Guardian, and a very powerful picture. The photos are all very powerful at the moment, aren't they, of the relatives and friends of people taken hostage by Hamas gathering at a press conference in Tel Aviv today. You can just see the distress on that poor lady's face. And The Guardian deciding to go with what's happening in terms of Gaza and the, 1 million people who've been asked to flee to southern Gaza and leave the city.
Yeah, it's interesting the way they're covering, because they present that quite neutrally, the Gaza story. But, of course, the Israelis did say earlier today 1.1 million Gazans had to evacuate from the north to the south, and that is widely understood by the international community to be an impossible task, an impossible feat. You know, for a start, the largest hospital is in the evacuation zone, and there are plenty of people in there who can't be moved. The roads are already destroyed. There's very little petrol. There's very little of anything. So they're in a siege situation, and an evacuation has been ordered, which it's understood, and certainly the Americans have already put pressure on this from this point of view, to be merely kind of symbolic, that there's a very real sense that whether they evacuate or not, the invasion will commence and the attacks will commence. So, you know, it's very neutrally told, but it's a devastating story and one that the international community is really worried about.
Anita, let's bring you in now, and as we talk, have a look at another front story, or front page, I should say. This is the front page of the FT Weekend tomorrow. They are also going with the same line: residents fleeing Gaza City in fear, and a lot more detail to unpick in this particular article.
Yes, and they talk about, you know, the UN in particular. Zoe mentions the international community has said that this would basically be calamitous, the amount of displacement that we could end up seeing, and the expectation is that it's going to be sort of a period of 24 hours in which civilians are going to be expected to leave this area, and we are talking about 1.1 million people in an area, in a sort of area that only really encompasses about 2 million. So that's sort of half the country, if you can imagine that, you know, in the UK. And the FT has some really good detail about the sort of way in which people are being forced to flee. So on cars, on foot, on donkeys, in minibuses, and the roads have been destroyed, and the fuel shortages. It's clearly quite a lot of kind of chaos. And I think that one of the things that really strikes one reading this article is the Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, obviously saying on the Sabbath day, which is obviously quite unusual to happen in a Jewish country like Israel, this is only the beginning. So really, this is the international community and also Gazans very much braced for what is going to be quite a dramatic event taking place over the next sort of 2 or 3 days.
Interesting also to add, of course, that Hamas are telling people in Gaza to stay put.
And that is something that does come up a lot. That a lot of Palestinians are trapped, not just by the raw kind of facts of the shortages, and not just by the impossibility of the roads, but the fact that the Hamas are telling them that this is just Israeli propaganda and they can't leave. Now, they don't have any plausibility whatsoever, Hamas, but if that's what they're saying, then obviously you face reprisals from them as well if you do try and leave. So it's just unthinkable what this must feel like.
And one thing to say is that this obviously has historical significance, because back in 1948, a lot of this is steeped in so much history, of which, the British played a major part. But in 1948, one of the things that happened was quite a lot of Palestinians effectively at that point fled. And that was part of what led to the kind of creation of Israel. So there's a bit of obviously a huge part of this is wranglings over the territory itself. And so even telling people to evacuate could be seen, and certainly is being interpreted by Hamas, as a kind of land grab or provocative act. And so you have these civilians are very much caught up in that. And I think what we see throughout the papers, whether it's Guardian or the FT, is civilians on both sides being utterly devastated.
It just goes to show, doesn't it, what a difficult and hideous situation it is. Let's move on to the Daily Telegraph. They lead with a line that we had here on Sky News about 7 o'clock this evening. News actually of Israel has already been over the border. We believe special forces moving into Gaza and then back out again to carry out a number of sorties, in particular try and get more intelligence about hostages. So some people reading into this wondering, is this the beginning of the ground invasion, or is this, just the first few tentative moves over?
Another thing that comes out in the Telegraph story is that, just as Hamas are trying to kind of wage this propaganda war, they're also using the Palestinians as human shields. So they're using hostages as kind of leveraging against the Israelis, and they're using the Palestinians as human shields. And there is absolutely no limit to the kind of cruelty that they're prepared to wreak, just kind of to protect themselves. It's interesting. I think the reports are that the Israeli army only went in for the first time today, but of course, from a Palestinian point of view, there have been multiple airstrikes. 1,800 Palestinians have already been killed. A huge amount of territory has already been reduced to rubble. So it probably feels, slightly theoretical whether they've just made opening forays, whether the ground invasion will start on Sunday. From a ground point of view, they already haven't slept for 4 days.
Talking of a ground invasion, if we have a look at the front page of the Daily Mail, Anita, we get an indication, don't we, of what's amassing on the border, this 300,000 strong troops in terms of reservists and the tanks. I mean, look at that picture.
Yes, and I think we're going to see so much alarming footage over the next few days, but this certainly gives a sense of the escalation and nature of escalation of the conflict. As Zoe was talking about, the Telegraph piece talks about 750 targets that have already been, attacked in some way via airstrikes in Israel, but no, this is really the sort of heavy artillery rolling in preparation for what is going to be quite, it seems to me, an intensive period of fighting. And so this is the sort of localised incursions, but that is part of the intelligence gathering and the preparations and looking for weapons ahead of what is going to be probably some very fierce fighting.
And let's just finish by having a quick look at the Times. It's always the stories of the individuals which are most powerful, aren't they? And this is, in particular, a story of a vulnerable girl. She's 17 years old. She is severely disabled, and she is one of the people we believe has been taken by Hamas at that music festival.
It's so appalling, when as soon as you hear anything about that Supernova music festival, the absolutely premeditated, determined extinction of joy in that act really strikes you. But also the fact that many of the hostages are severely disabled. The 17-year-old has muscular dystrophy. She's completely unable to care for herself. They hope the father is still with her. They have no idea. Intelligence. And it's just appalling. And actually, one disabled commentator in the British press was commenting today that disabled people so often get forgotten in this coverage. Yep. And everybody talks about, could you flee? Could you do this? Could you do that? Can you leave hospital? And it's almost as if in the complete kind of blanket of ignorance, it doesn't matter what happens to disabled people. Well, of course it does.
Very similar to those who are disabled in Gaza City.
Yeah,
as well,
exactly.
Indeed. Anita and Zoe, thank you very much. We'll be back with you just after this very short break. And we shall see you just a few minutes' time, including news. It's understood that the government intends to effectively scrap short prison sentences. That and the possible implications, plus other stories that are in the pages, we'll be having a look at in just a few minutes' time. Just stay with us. Hi there, very good evening and welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me now is Zoe Williams and Anita Boateng. Welcome back, good to see you both. Let's have a look very briefly at some of the inside pages. Straight to the Times, page 2. Fewer criminals are going to jail, in part because of shorter sentences. We all know about the drama of just 600 spaces left across the estate in terms of prison spaces. This is something that we understand Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, is going to lay out in proposals on Monday. I mean, what do you make of this, Anita?
Well, I should say I'm a former special advisor in the Ministry of Justice, and we had to grapple with this a great deal. And I was noting the number of the prison spaces. We were sort of at 82,000 people in the prison estate back when I did the job. And actually, one of the things that the government's been grappling with is the fact that, honestly, with a lot more sentencing, a lot more tougher sentencing, capacity just isn't there to meet that. So I think that these are going to be quite controversial reforms, I think, but absolutely necessary if you're going to avoid basically having to let prisoners out.
But is this the right way of tackling it? What do you think, Zoe?
Well, look, this kind of figure of 600 places left masks the fact that those are going to be dispersed across the country, A. B, they're not going to all be in the right category of prison. So some of them will be in high security when they need a remand prison. Some of them will be in an open prison when they need high security. It's an absolute shambles. And then you look at the situation in Wandsworth, from which there was that escape so recently. And the reason that happened, as attested by Her Majesty of Prison Inspectorates, was that they was understaffed and the staff that were there were poorly trained. Right? So what we're looking at is persistent long-term underfunding by governments who then turn around and go, wow, what on earth has happened that we can't even manage to house our own prisoners? It was exactly what was always going to happen if you don't put enough money in, and it's exactly part of the same picture for which the kind of rivers are full of sewage and NHS is falling down. Okay. So I'm not that surprised, I suppose, is the short answer.
In the 11 o'clock hour, we can talk about that in more detail. Let's look at one more story. Freddie Flintoff being very much at the forefront of our minds recently. Of course, he had a very bad accident filming Top Gear. We've seen him kind of trying to recover from the severe facial injuries you can see there, and he's going to get a £9 million handout, according to The Sun. Anita?
Yes, I mean, it's a dramatic amount of money. And I'm slightly surprised that the BBC doesn't have a sort of clause in there that says if you drive too fast, this stuff might happen. Obviously, I must confess, I haven't seen the Top Gear smash, so I have no idea what was the cause of it. But if true, I mean, it's quite an astonishing amount of money.
The thing is with Freddie Flintoff is that he was always like such a golden boy. He was such a looker. My first husband still has a portrait of him on the wall.
My husband has one too.
Oh,
wow. Heartthrob.
He's still a very handsome man.
Yeah, he is, but that will be why he got such a big payout, right? He'll be like, I'm a pretty boy.
I think
comment from me.
I think mentally it was a very tough time. I mean, he's given up the job, hasn't he? We haven't seen him on television for a very long time, so he's had a big impact on his earnings, and who knows the psychological impact of being involved in such a...
Of course. Thank you for bringing us back to reason.
That is what I'm here for, but it's nice to see him smiling again, isn't it? Because we haven't actually seen him very much in the last couple of years. So there you go. Thank you very much, Zoe and Anita. Stay where you are. You're not allowed to leave just yet. We'll see you for more at the top of the hour here on Sky News. Coming up next here on Sky News at 11 o'clock, more for you on the Israel-Gaza issue. We're talking a warning that Gaza is fast becoming a hellhole as Israel tells those living in the north of the Strip to evacuate. The very latest and the top headlines for you here on Sky News in a few minutes.